The idea of a mastermind is that all of your minds are together looking at each person's business or their approach to their career. And we would essentially put someone on a hot seat and say, what are you doing right now? And they would say, oh, I'm doing this. I'm using this kind of marketing strategy. These are my products. These are my services. This is the group I want to serve. This is my market.
Okay, can you help with some of the calligraphy stuff? Can you because mashallah, we have so much calligraphy between all these homes here in Maryland. He's like, can you just be responsible from a calligraphy standpoint? Just making sure all of these beautiful pieces are there. And I was like, what's happening? He's like, oh, POTUS is coming. I'm on the phone. I'm Googling what is POTUS, P-O-T. I was like, oh, the president's coming. Oh, mashallah.
By the way, the whole concept of like a sadaqah jariyah or an action that's passed on, that, the people that came before us did something good, and then that carried over to the next generation, which carried over to the next generation, which carried over to the next generation. In other words, like when I accepted Islam, somebody taught me how to pray. Well, somebody taught that person how to pray, who taught that person how to pray, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ and all the way back to the Sahaba, right? So there's some chain there. The same thing goes for any good we're putting out in the world.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum. Hope everyone is doing well, inshallah. Welcome to the first episode ever of the Impact Lab podcast. And in today's episode, I have someone who is very, very dear to me, someone who's very special, mashallah, someone who I've looked up to. And look, he's turning red. Dr. Tori. Dr. Tori, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
So Dr. Tori, you are someone, mashallah, who I've looked up to for many, many years. And you have played a tremendous role in Sunan and how Sunan started. And I would actually say Sunan would not be here if it was not for my mentors, and you being one of the main ones, along with a few others, but you, mashallah, played a very, very big role. And if I was to take the story back, this actually started, Tori, because I was looking through the messages. And I sent you some of the screenshots because when the conversation started. But it was actually a little bit before that where I really got an opportunity to work with you very closely. And this, subhanAllah, believe it or not, happened 9 years ago.
What?
Remember what it was?
That is... No.
So 9 years ago, I think it was 9 years ago today, or maybe it might have been yesterday.
Oh, then I know what it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the Obama.
When President Obama visited
Masjid,
Islamic Study Baltimore. And that was the first time that, though I wasn't like really involved as mashallah some of the other great members of the community were, but I remember that's when you were kind of brought in that like almost like a project manager as a leader role.
Yeah.
And I think you were tasked with essentially being the PM.
Yeah, with media relations. Yeah, I was tasked with media relations. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember just, mashallah, like one of the things that really stood out to me, we were talking about where you had to inform your leadership at that time where you were currently working, and the message that he responded back to you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Can you explain that a little bit?
I can talk about that. Yeah, sure. So essentially I messaged my boss saying, and so my boss reported directly to the CEO of the health system. So I was, there was a person between me and the CEO, and my boss also happened to be my mentor. And I just sort of gave him a heads up. I was like, hey, I've been tasked with this, dealing with and interfacing with the media when President Obama visits the Masjid. So I want you to know I'm probably going to be in the news or something. And if they start to, dig around, they'll find out where I work, and it might actually have, a very positive or a very negative response back towards our employer. So I wanted to give you a heads up, and I wanted to ask, what do you think I should do? So he messaged the CEO, and the CEO happened to reply with an email that hit at exactly the right spot. Meaning there was a tense moment where somebody who was sort of not fond of Obama and not fond of Muslims generally showed up at the Masjid, and I was asked to go out and sort of calm him down. And so I did, and he was eventually, escorted. He left on his own, and then they sort of just investigated. The police sort of followed him just to see where he went afterwards. And I don't know fully what happened to him after that. I just know that it was very, very tense. It was scary in a way, and so then we came in. I came in, so we had a sort of like this control room sort of set up where we took care of anything related to media, social media, calls that came in, et cetera. So it was sort of like a communications control room that we had set up. And so we had monitors up with news channels on. We had people who were monitoring from their laptops different social channels. And essentially, when things were coming across our feed, we would sort of talk about them, and it just so happened to be a wave of negative stuff. Like it was like, people on either side of the spectrum were making their comments either about Muslims or about Obama in such a way that it was pretty tense. And so while that was happening, I was kind of in a state, like I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, is this going to get worse before he arrives? Like it was just so intense. And then right in that moment, after this guy leaves the masjid area, police follow him. I come in, there's negative stuff on the news, negative stuff in the social feeds. And then I get an email from the CEO of the place that I worked. And he said, Ed, I heard that you were concerned that about how this might reflect on our organization, and I want you to know that there are a lot of small-minded people out there, and if those small-minded people happen to have loud voices, then I, meaning him, I as a Jewish man, will stand up there with you as a Muslim man, and we will give them something to talk about.
SubhanAllah.
And he said, you have nothing to worry about. We are proud of you in this moment. And so I read this to our communications room, and we were all like, some people were like, hands on the head, like letting out a sigh, like of relief. Others were like, some were tearing up. I certainly was. And like, it was just this weird cathartic moment where it just like, it felt like, wait a minute, like we're just being bombarded with negativity right now. And let's get through this. So anyway, it was it was hazing in a way for all of us on the that were going through it at the time, and so we all became very tight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the beautiful things, Tori, from that was like, I mean, I was a lot younger at that time. I mean, I have like one white hair now, mashallah. But like, what really stood out to me was, mashallah, just seeing your leadership style. When you, and I know you're not going to like anything I'm going to say, but like you stepped in and how like the team assembled, right? It was very inspiring to see that. And that's, I would say, is like, for me, subhanAllah, was like, like that's amazing, just seeing how, and again, not just you, just like even within members of the community, everyone was going above and beyond, making sure the walls are painted, everything is ready. Like we have a guest coming, right? And this is the president of the United States. Like this is POTUS himself, right? We got to make sure that, because we're not just representing our own masjid, we're representing Muslims in America at that stage. And we want to make sure that, we're doing our best from an ihsan standpoint, that, despite political differences, right, we still show up as Muslims and we do the right thing. So that was actually very beautiful for me. And I think, I don't remember what year this was. Do you remember what year this was?
Which one? When he arrived?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2016.
2016.
Yeah, because I could tell you the reason I know. So this was actually also a pivot point for me in my involvement in the community. So I had been involved early when I moved to the area in like 2003, but I kind of backed off because I saw a pattern of where people would put in a lot of work, decisions would be made, and then it would be undone by a parking lot conversation or a shoe rack conversation. And I was so frustrated with that, I just sort of retreated in a way from the community. I came to Salah and I taught new Muslims, but other than that, I kind of retreated. And so when I received the call from one of our good friends, I remember it was just after Fajr. I was driving to work, and I received the call, and he said, POTUS is coming to visit. And I was like, what are you saying? I don't even know what you mean. Because actually, I didn't even know the acronym POTUS. I never actually so that's how
same thing happened to me. a very
Yeah.
dear friend of ours. We know him. I won't say his name.
Yeah.
Because he had contacted me. He's like, "Hey, can you help with some of the calligraphy stuff? Can you because
Yeah.
mashallah, we have so much calligraphy between all these homes here in Maryland." He's like, "Can you just be responsible from a calligraphy standpoint, just making sure all of these beautiful pieces are there?" And I was like, "What's happening?" He's like, "Oh, POTUS is coming." I'm on the phone. I'm Googling what is POTUS, POTUS. I was like, "Oh, the president's
I
coming.
didn't
Oh,
even.
mashallah." So
Yeah.
we're
So
both
for
on the
me,
same.
that event was pretty profound because I saw the all of the generations come
Mm,
together in a way that I hadn't seen before, and specifically the youth were so energized and so many talented people in our communities. Just to see everybody come together was just it was heartwarming, and then also to handle some of the challenges of it in an elegant way was really really heartwarming. And so that's what kind of got me energized again to to be active in the community. So
yeah, subhanallah.
yeah, yeah,
And then, subhanAllah, Tori, that's like when I think you and I became a little bit more closer because I
yeah,
saw you, I helped you in a little bit of whatever small capacity I could. But then I think there was a few outreach efforts because I was kind of just going back through our messages over the years. And I think there was a few outreach efforts that happened, and then you and I came closer and closer. But I think, subhanAllah, like the real tipping point, if I was to reflect, happened back, and I wrote the date down because I think it was a big milestone. August 11th. August 11th of 2019. You had
okay,
sent this, these were, I believe, the days of Eid. Eid al-Adha had just passed. I think this was like day 2 or day 3. It might have been like a few days
okay,
shortly thereafter.
okay,
And we were visiting my mom. I think we had a dawat at my mom's house. So we're all sitting there with family. And I get this message from you. And the message said, "I have one free guest ticket to the Brendon Burchard Influencer Conference in San Diego
yeah,
in October. Want to go?" And that for me is like, this is August 11th. And for me, when I received this message, because at this point, I had already started Sunan, right? But I was kind of like dabbling, right? Because I was still
hmm
working full time at the government. Alhamdulillah, I was as a GS-13, worked my way up. I was there for 11 years at this point at SSA.
wow,
And I'm like, it's in San Diego. I'd love to go. But part of me is like, I was questioning myself.
mm,
Like, am I ready for this? Like, there's this fear in a sense. And I looked at my messages and I realized I responded to you right immediately. I think like within half
yeah,
hour, I think I sat on it and I responded to you in half hour. I was like, "I'd love to. Give me a day. Let me see how the schedule." I was making excuses. I said, "Let me look at my calendar. Let me look at my schedule." Oh, government employee, come on. This is pretty down on.
yeah, yeah,
But then I realized, I remember having this conversation internally where I said to myself, take the step, just do it.
hmm
What's the worst that'll happen? You'll go,
yeah,
you'll see things, you'll see that, all right, this is really not for me, but just what's the worst that can happen? And subhanAllah, I messaged you, I think it was the next day. And I
hmm
said, Bismillah, let's do it. And this was in August. A few months later,
uh-huh,
2 months later, you and I flew into San Diego. I remember I brought my wife with me. I was
yeah,
like, we'll make a small trip out of it. And subhanAllah, I would say that conference for me was a very critical moment in my journey. In my relationship with you, like,
hmm
just number one, just reflecting back on that you could have sent that to anyone, right?
yeah,
But subhanAllah, like you saw something. I don't
yeah,
know what you saw. I still don't know what you see, but you shared that with me. And that's a very, very special and precious thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But even when we went there, like we were together the entire time through the conference.
yeah,
And I was subhanAllah looking back and reflecting on the names. And, you know, Tom Bilu,
hmm
I butchered his last name, the guy from Quest
Billieu,
Nutrition.
yeah, Tom
Bilu.
Billieu, yeah, he was
Tom
there,
Bilu was there.
yeah,
Anthony Trucks was there. And we'll talk
Anthony
about
Trucks was
Anthony
there,
a little bit
yeah,
more because you were just at his thing last week.
yeah,
Dean
yeah,
Graziosi was there,
yeah,
right? Jamie Kern Lima,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Who
and that was
sold
our
her
first time
company.
talking, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. She sold her company to L'Oreal for $1 billion.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Lewis Howe, right? The guy from School of Greatness. Like these are all the speakers that were lined up.
Right.
And for me, it's like, this is the first time I'm ever hearing these guys. And they're just like, and you just saw, mashallah, how successful they were. And the impact, for me, was more so like the impact that they were able to create.
Yeah.
Right? They were successful from a dunya standpoint, but also just like, even from an impact,
Yeah.
right? The level of impact that they were able to create. And for me, that was like one of the big things I took back at, like, maybe Sunan can be something greater. And I remember specifically one of the exercises that Brendon had us do was write down one of the things that you're afraid of doing, that you know you need to do. And for me, it was videos. I was like, I refuse.
How far you've come. How far you've come.
For me, I was like, I refuse to get in front of a camera. I'm like, I just can't do it. And I remember we were like in a small group because they would make us break up into these pods. And one of the guys said to me, I don't even know his name now. I remember him. I remember he was just a guy in finance. He's like, you know what you should do? When we go on break, just take your camera on your phone and just record something. You don't even have to send it out. Just record a message talking about your experience here. I didn't do it, but that for me was like the tipping point, because I realized that, okay, if I really want to take Sunan to the next level, if I'm really passionate about, inshallah, the impact, and I'm serious about it, I have to get comfortable. There's no other way. Like this is the means of communication.
Yeah. And I remember also, I think we were talking about it afterwards, and I told you that that's actually recording video, even those that I didn't use, but I reviewed them. Recording video again and again and again actually helped me be a much better public speaker. And now actually sort of how I identify in a way as a speaker, So it's kind of crazy. I also remember when you sent me the message that you were leaving your job, and I was like, wait, what? Like, no, we were high energy. It was like, don't just jump to a rushed thing. Like, I was like, oh my God, but alhamdulillah, it was something you were stewing on before. And it was a calculated decision, and, took a lot of bravery and also tawakkul, to take that step. And mashallah, it's paid off. So and may Allah keep it a fruitful decision.
Because I was looking back at because I remember, I think you had flown back that Sunday. The conference ended Sunday. I think you flew back Sunday. And I said, let me make a little small trip out of it. So my wife and I, we stayed back, I think, one more day. We were in Huntington Beach. And I remember you sent me a message. I think I sent you a thank you note, just saying, again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. Thank you so much for extending this offer to me. And you said, the best thing you can do for me is implement what you've learned and retire early.
Oh my God, I don't remember that. Wow.
Yeah. The best thing you can do for me is implement what you've learned and retire early.
Wow. SubhanAllah.
And subhanAllah, not that I'm retired, but just leaving that stage of life. Because this was back in October when we had the conference. And actually going back to when you sent me that original message during the days of Eid in August. And then my last day at the government was in February the following year. So 6 months later.
Wow. And then also the other connections that came out of that. We, of course, we share a very dear friend that came out of that when I signed up for the Mastermind. And then also my current speaking mentor is one of those speakers, right? So
absolutely,
trucks. So
absolutely,
yeah.
And the mutual friend that you actually introduced me to during that conference, Kareem.
Yeah,
Kareem is, mashallah, an amazing guy, mashallah.
Yeah, and he's doing an incredible service to the ummah, by as a coach and helping people work through their challenges to get to the next level. So incredible guy, incredible service. So
absolutely. And Kareem, I know he's going to be watching. I'm going to send him this afterwards. But Kareem's helped me in so many ways. Like I remember, again, that video blog was for me during the conference. It was very apparent of the need that I had to get over this video aspect. But Kareem is actually the one that really worked with me on that. And because I did the coaching sessions with Kareem, and mashallah, he's been my coach for 3 years now.
Wow.
Countless
Wow.
programs I've done through with him on the one-on-ones. But I remember like we did this because when I talked about like we're talking about fears and one of the things you're afraid of, I said videos. I was like, I don't want to do it. And he's like, Sajjad, do this right now. In the
Mm.
call, he's like, take out your phone, turn the camera on, and just talk about something you're passionate about. And then I was just talking. I was like, great. And he's like, actually, no, I'm sorry. First, he said, tell me something about that you're passionate about. I think I gave like the example of Sunan and, I want to be a catalyst, create positive impact and do this and that. He's like, great. Now turn on your camera, have it facing you and do that exact same thing. And I'm like stuttering. I'm turning red. I'm like sweating. But Kareem is like, you got to put in the reps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I started doing at that time to help me kind of get over this is I put myself out there. I would
Yeah.
actually record every night. And what I would do is I'd just talk about my day. I was like, hey, my light setup is this right now. This is the aperture. I've set it to 6%, just so I can kind of
Mhm.
notice the visual effects, what the mic was dialed into, the gain and everything. But more importantly, what I would do is I would talk about what did I accomplish today?
Mm.
These are the things that I did. This is what I wanted to do. These are some of the challenges I had. These are some of the discovery calls I had for Sunan. Oh, we landed this contract. Oh, we lost this business today because of XYZ. And what I would do is I would share that with Kareem and I would share that with a few people that I trust. And then I'd be like, critique this.
Uh-huh.
Right. And over time, what I saw was that I started getting better. Like my speech, when I'm nervous, I start rambling and I start going super
Mhm.
fast. Right? And then it's like, okay, take a moment, slow down your speech, get a little bit more articulate when you're speaking, be more thoughtful. So it was actually an amazing guy, mashallah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
shout out
Yeah.
to Kareem.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to
For
Kareem.
anyone who's interested in benefiting and learning from that, Kareem, mashallah, is the guy who's
Kareem
amazing
El
at that.
Sayed. Yeah.
Yes, and we'll drop his thing here as well, inshallah. So, Tori, mashallah, we've had a wonderful journey when we started, and we're doing amazing things together, inshallah. One of the things you brought up that I wanted to kind of touch base upon during the influencer conference, and this was like one of the first time I was exposed to this, is the concept of a mastermind.
Oh yeah.
And I remember when Brendon got on stage, it was actually a three speakers, Brendon, Dean Graziosi, and I don't remember the third individual.
Ethan.
Ethan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they were doing this mastermind and they got up there and I don't remember the exact price point, but it was something crazy.
Yeah.
It was like in the 5 digits. Like, this is a mastermind, X number of duration, months long. Join us. I'm like, how much? But that's when, the concept for me, the big shift happened in terms of having coaches and mentors. Because essentially that's what the mastermind was.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and we'll get into then what we did.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, before getting to that particular mastermind, I'll tell you that my sort of like my backstory on how I got into influence and rapport and behavior change and all of that. I was burning out in my profession early on while I was in my training as a physician, and I looked ahead at my mentors, some of them, and they were jaded or didn't necessarily come in with the like bright-eyed, bushy-tail feel that I had. Like I wanted to serve the world, and all of a sudden I was looking at people that were sort of seemed to be like jaded is the right word, and I just didn't want the life that I saw that they had. They didn't know their kids, they didn't know their spouses. Many were in midst of divorce or what have you, and I didn't want what they had at that point, right? So I started looking for an exit strategy, and when I did, I had some online businesses. I was a dabbler for many years, actually, in the internet marketing space, but my path to learning was that I realized I had to learn how to market. So I called up a semi-famous internet marketer who I just called and said, "Hey, I have a weird question, but I promise you, I'm not a weirdo. Can I come learn from you?" And
This
so
was
I
Frank
then
Kern.
ended up using my vacation. What's that?
This was Frank Kern.
Yeah. So I used my vacation to fly out there. I ended up buying pretty much whatever he was selling at that time. So I was at a a conference he had there. I think it was called Mass Control. I was in a couple of other things. I was in his Mass Control monthly thing, which was like an expensive thing that occurred every month or whatever. But I learned everything I could learn from him, how he saw the world, etc. Then I realized the following year. So I did that, and then I studied what he said to study, and I studied all of his materials and tried to implement those things. Then, by the way, keep in mind, I'm in my medical training, right? So like, it's not like I could just, I didn't have all the time in the world to do it. So I was doing this in my spare time, also between 6 kids, right? Then I realized I needed to learn persuasive writing or direct response copywriting. So the same methodology: call up somebody, ask if I can study from them, and then along the way, each year, I would ask somebody in a different domain. So when I did internet marketing and then direct response copywriting, they all reference like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, or hypnosis. And so my next thing to study was hypnosis, and then the following year another type of hypnosis, then NLP. So each year for 24 years, I picked a different topic to study, and I would do the same methodology. I would call up somebody when I could find them. I would call them up and say, I have a weird question, but I promise you I'm not a weirdo. Can I come learn from you? I have a vacation coming up, etc. So I did that for about 23, 24 years now. And along the way, that was sort of my methodology for learning. And not every single one, almost all of them had this concept of a mastermind, which is where you get a group of people that are like-minded, not necessarily in the exact same space, right? But they're entrepreneurial or they're intrapreneurial, right? Like they're working inside of an organization and they're trying to, make change and create new things. That they would get together, and the idea of a mastermind is that all of your minds are together, looking at each person's business or their approach to their career, and we would essentially put someone on a hot seat and say, what are you doing right now? And they would say, oh, I'm doing this. I'm using this kind of marketing strategy. These are my products. These are my services. This is this is the group I want to serve. This is my market. So in that instance, that person would be on the hot seat. And then all of these minds from all of these different disciplines, domains, businesses, they would all weigh in and try to see what's working, what's not working, give suggestions, small tweaks. And in all of those, I saw that sometimes just a small tweak was enough for somebody's business or their marketing efforts to completely pivot. And then the other thing that I saw was that it can be very lonely when you're in business or when you're in leadership. It can be very lonely. But when you're with other people that are like-minded, even if they're in a completely different discipline, there's this camaraderie, there's this hey, I just want to check in. I haven't seen you in a while. I haven't heard from you. I didn't see you in the messaging, whatever. And you check in and you realize, you know what? Like, it's an emotional roller coaster to be a leader in the community or to be the leader in a business or an entrepreneurial effort. And so there was that aspect of the mastermind. And so then we formed our own, right, locally. We got together with our dear brother Sharif and started a mastermind of 3. And met regularly and would bounce ideas off of each other. And it's really good because sometimes when you're in a mastermind like that, somebody can call you out and just be like, bro, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? Wait, did you call? Like, so for me, it was like, for me, the challenge is always pricing, right? Like, oh, I don't want to, ask that amount, right? And so, and you and Sharif would be like, just do it, man. Come on. Like, and then you call me up and Sharif has a way of just like, calling you out, making you feel like, oh my God, how can I show my face ever again? And but it's really helpful. The concept of a mastermind is ideas and support.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And honestly, like even for me, like I remember just again, going back to the influencer conference, at that time, it was like, man, this is expensive. But I'm like, but I know there's so much value in it.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I mean, Sunan was just a baby. Like, I think it was me and maybe like one other person I had on my team as like a designer. And I was like, man, I would love to do this one day. And what I did is when we went back to the hotel room, I actually filled out that card. I wrote my name.
Did you?
I wrote my card details. I wrote everything on there, not with the intention of turning it in, but I was like, inshallah, one day I'm going to be able to attend one of these
Yeah,
because of just, inshallah, the amount of value. And for me, I think that was also like a big stepping stone because I was like, man, mastermind and then having coaches.
yeah,
Because like for me, like, yeah, schools are great, universities are great, but and I think this was like when Dean Graziosi said this at the conference. He's like, you know what I'm doing with my kids? He's like, I'm not going to put them in like higher ed education. Like, yeah, that's great. But what I'd rather do is take that money and hire the best coach in the world within that specific arena. So for example, if they want to get into public speaking,
yeah,
I would rather take that amount of money that they would spend in getting these masters or whatever and hire that best coach and have that one-on-one training. They would be so far ahead. And for me, that was like, huh. So, like then we started working with you, like for example, alhamdulillah, I've been working with you this year. But even before you, Chief, like I was working with Kareem for the past 3 years, right? I think since I left SSA, when I started full-time at Sunan during COVID, for a few years, working with Kareem and just seeing the evolution of myself. But for me, it's like, as you're kind of going through that journey, you don't see as much results because it's like you're living it. Like when you're trying to lose weight, you'll see it on the scale, but it's like, but I don't feel it, right? Because you're just kind of going through it. But for me, like the biggest thing was when my wife, because I would ask her, I was like, Rajda, have you noticed any change? And she's like, yeah, you're a lot more calmer. You're a better articulate speaker. You're doing more videos. Like you're stepping up, right? And then like kind of going through the module with Kareem, you realize that in the beginning when you started, it's like, oh, there's this big mountain that I want to climb. And then by the end of the session, by the end of those 12 weeks, it's like you climbed the mountain, but it's like, this wasn't a mountain. This was my neighborhood park.
That's so key.
But then it gives you clarity and it's like, I want to climb that mountain.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just like that constant evolving and the constant grooming and reflecting of what is having that sense of clarity that what you're trying to accomplish. So for me, I think that was like one of the biggest things that came out of the coaching and the mastermind aspect as well.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to cost, by the way, my mental math was, I kind of tried, I actively tried to spend at least 10% of my income on personal development. And so, I would do a certain amount on personal development and a certain amount on charity, and then all the other stuff that I had to do. So when people say pay yourself first, right? There's investing, there's charity, and there's personal development. And so I would try to make sure I put money into all of those buckets. And the personal development domain is a powerful one, as long as you're deliberate about it. I mean, there were many times where I called those experts and I would, I sort of would study what they told me to study, and occasionally I joined actually several masterminds from some well-known folks. Of course, many of them would not remember me by any means, but some are far better than others. And so the key is that you look for something that's going to be, they're going to call you out. It's not expensive encouragement. It's actually going to be like, they're going to call you out and they're going to make sure you hold yourself accountable, right, for the things that you're trying to do. And then the other is the support when there are ups, to make sure you don't get too up, right? So you stay humble. And then when there are downs, that you don't get too down, that you remember why you're doing this, right? Certainly the mission of Sunan, the mission for me is to influence whoever's doing good in the world. I want to help them do better at influence and their relationships and all that. So so when we're down, to remember the why, and when we're too far up, to remember the real why, like why we're created and how insignificant we are. But we are also given some incredible blessings that I think masterminds and personal development stuff can help us bring to the world. So immense value there. Immense value. Yeah.
Definitely. And one thing just comes to mind as you were mentioning that, I was just reflecting, is, like the journey of entrepreneurship, it's hard. It's not easy.
It is.
Like, because if you do it right, and inshallah, like we do it right, But if you're really sincere and passionate and really want to create the change, oftentimes it's all internal.
Yeah.
Like, I may be lazy. All right, I gotta address this. I don't have energy. How do I fix this? Right?
Yeah.
I can't get in front of a camera. All right, now I know what I gotta fix.
I'm an
Right? So it's like
imposter. Common
imposter
one.
syndrome.
Very
That's
common.
me right here.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like the journey of entrepreneurship is such an internal journey where you're seeing all of these developments that need to happen within yourself.
Yeah.
And you need
And
to
by the
be
way,
able.
this is not limited, of course, to entrepreneurs. When I stepped into the role of president of the Masjid, oof, wow, like a lot of personal development had to happen there, a lot, very quickly, because there's this huge amana, right? So it's similar, and so I tried to be congruent where the personal development that I was seeking for the entrepreneurial efforts and my desire to do what you had the guts to do and step away from the employment, my desire to do that plus to serve the role that I was serving in the community, I was trying to make sure those were congruent, that where the skills were similar, and I needed to learn them, I needed to be curious about how to develop them better and stronger, because it's, I actually think it's our duty, right? Or else we're stepping into something like we have certain blessings and a certain charge that if we are to do them well, we have to develop these skills.
Definitely.
It's not an option. For us, I'm saying as Muslims, the results are not the dollars that are flowing in. The results are how it will be measured, in the end, right? On Yom Kippur, right? So how that will be measured then. And so money is a measure, but the other stuff like your why, your intention, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing the right way? Are you doing it with the best of intentions? Are you doing it in an act of service? So all of those things, and are you not compromising when it comes to Deen as it relates to business and things like that? That to me, powerful stuff, powerful, and the support of a community of people together that are committed to personal development. Because here's the thing: if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a leader, there are plenty of people to tell you that that's not right. That's not the right. Why are you? Who are you? Who do you think you are? Kind of stuff. Or is that really the safest thing to do? People that love us might actually counsel us on not taking the step because it's scary to them. And so this is why it's really important to surround yourself with people that can carry you through that when you need to be carried. It's the importance of community. And this is a deep part of our Deen, which is to have himma, to have lofty aspirations and to help each other along the way. So the other thing is, like, if you go throughout the Muslim world and you go to the marketplace, all the people selling, cloth are all next to each other. All the people selling itar are all next to each other. All the people that are selling, abayas and thobes, they're all next to each other. And there's this spirit of collaboration, this spirit of like, I have enough and I'm going to help you get yours too. Like, we need to bring that forward, because that's like a beautiful aspect of our Deen and a beautiful aspect of business conducted in other cultures. And it doesn't always have to be, grow for the sake of growing, but like, are we being deliberate? Are we being and growing in a way that serves? So that's one of the other things I love about our masterminds together. So
Yeah, and actually, that's a very beautiful point too, because that's like one of the things, like we live in such a capitalistic society, and through school, through the MBA programs and everything, like it's just about money, 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 money. Like, how do you maximize your ROI? Do this, do that. And for me, like one of the things I realized is like even at Sunan, trying to scale it, trying to grow it. Alhamdulillah is so generous. We've grown. We've accomplished so much that I've never would have imagined that we would have been able to do. Like, our team right now is over 15 people from around the world. And one of the things I try to do often is like, sometimes I'll look at things or I'll look at other different organizations and there'll be like this feeling inside my heart, like, oh, there's another competitor in this space. Like, oh. But you know what I started doing now? I challenge myself. It's like every time I feel that, especially if it's like a Muslim organization, I will send them a message. And I will say, may Allah continue to put immense barakah in everything you're doing and allow your business to scale beyond your wildest dreams. And then that forces me to start building this relationship. And then it forces me to get into that mindset, the abundance mindset, that it's not, the pie is huge, right?
It is.
Rather than us looking at each other as competitors, what if you're true to the impact that we're trying to create, right? Because this is when the rubber hits the road. It's like, now how can we collaborate and create that bigger impact?
Right.
And then
you're
like
not competitors, you're contemporaries. You're existing at the same time. And you know what? The fact is, you are not, any one of us is not able to serve all of the people that need service, right? And so better to uplift. And by the way, the whole concept of like a sadaqah jariyah or an action that's passed on, that, you know, that the people that came before us did something good, and then that carried over to the next generation, which carried over to the next generation, which carried over to the next generation. In other words, like when I accepted Islam, somebody taught me how to pray, right? Well, somebody taught that person how to pray, who taught that person how to pray, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ and all the way back to the Sahaba, right? So there's some chain there. The same thing goes for any good we're putting out in the world. There are people that like that's how it spreads. It's how the goodness happens. Like, and the math is incalculable if you think about the spiritual math. Sure, if you want to look at just the money, and by the way, I'm not poo-pooing the money. The money is a huge part. It's very, very, very important. It's how we can do a lot of good with money by way of growing deliberately, intentionally, in a good way. We can also serve and give charity and all those things, but that's not our only measure. And when you think about a measure of goodness, of which charitable contributions is a part, of which service is a part, of which putting a good product in the world is a part, when you look at goodness and how it spreads, it's a beautiful thing to behold. And so for me, my sort of contribution to the world is in the domain of influence. I happen to think like we are. It's our duty to influence others. We're already doing it, actually, but it's our duty to be deliberate about it, right? In our deen, it's all about intention. Our actions are based on our intention. That's so are we being intentional about how we influence our kids, how we influence our communities, how we influence our customers and our clients and our team members and our organizations? Like, it's just when you think about the spiritual math of all this, to me, it's a beautiful, incalculable kind of thing. It just inspires awe. It's like awestruck with that.
Absolutely. So, Chief, since I have you here, I'm going to ask you a question because I want to benefit from it. So, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It's something that I feel that I've struggled with, and this is just being fully honest and vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Right? Because like my background was actually not in marketing or design. Mm-hmm. It's just been a hobby and a passion. And it's actually a very funny story because a very, very dear friend of mine, you know him really well, Matasam, right? Like when Medina Institute was starting off and, they're all helping out different things. He asked me like, hey, Sajjad, can you take a stab at creating the logo? And I'm like, I don't even know how to create, like what application do you use? Are we doing this in Microsoft Paint or what am I using? And I'm like, I started learning, is like trying to figure out like, oh, there's this application called Adobe Illustrator. There's a vector file, like learning all of these things. And I had to learn it, right? But I think like throughout that journey, it's like, for me, something that's I've always sat with is, but that's not really who you are, right? In the sense that, like my undergrad, I did IT, right? Information systems from UMBC. Then, working at SSA, we're always in like that IT arena. Like my family is predominantly IT. It's an IT family. right? All of our cousins and my dad were all IT. And then even, for example, masters, I did my MBA, but even that was like specialized in IT. So design marketing was just like a passion. And actually, subhanAllah, very early on, I actually hated it. I disliked design because it was like, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the creativity. But subhanAllah, Mu'tasim, he saw something. And he's like, Sajjad, you are doing this. You're doing this from Medina, right? Because you have an eye for it. You may not see it, but there's something there. And I remember that conversation. And then it was like, okay, if I'm going to try it, let me at least do it with sidq. Let me do it, not just dabble. Let me not just hodgepodge something together. But it's like, all right, if I'm really going to do it, let me do it with sincerity.
Yeah.
And then, subhanAllah, that's where the concept of design and marketing started for me. But going back to the question.
I never knew that, by the way.
Yeah, subhanAllah. It's like design, marketing, branding, like over the years, I've found to love it now. And now, like anytime I see an ad or I see anything, your mind starts to wander. And it's like, well, how could you do that better? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why are we treating social media as a bulletin board? Like, let's use it to be a social media.
Yeah.
Right? Or other things like that. But like one of the things I struggled with, going back to the question, is like, I feel oftentimes like I'm an imposter. Right? So how would you advise, and I'm getting free coaching here, guys. How would you advise me, or how can I better solve this, address this issue?
So the first aspect of this is that it's wonderful. It's wonderful that you feel like you're an imposter. You know why? Because it implies that there is a caring there. There's a sincere caring. Now, it could be, not, inshallah, not in your case, but it could be that some people feel like an imposter because they're worried about how they are perceived. But knowing you, I know that's not where the feeling is coming from. It's that somebody experiences something like imposter syndrome can indicate that there's a deep caring, that they want to do what is best with what they know and all those things. Now, the scarier thing to me would be to not feel it. See, there's actually a principle, it's actually one of our biases. It's one of the cognitive biases called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you ever heard of that? No. Dunning-Kruger effect? Okay, so so this is when people overestimate. It's a cognitive bias that we have. We're hardwired to overestimate our ability to do certain things. Now, what's really interesting is the more you know and the better skilled you are, the more it flips. It actually becomes the opposite. We actually underestimate what we know and what we can do. So the more you know something, it's sort of like, I mean, it's also like this when in a way, when you become Muslim, when somebody, like when I accepted Islam, at first you learn the core tenets and like, this makes sense. It's like, this is it. I feel it in my core. And then you start to learn stuff and you're like, oh my God, there's so much to learn. And you're like, oh my God, there's more and there's more and there's more. Like you're never done, right? The more you know, the more you're exposed to what you don't know. And so this happens, the more you develop an expertise, right? Which actually is sort of like, it led to my path of curiosity of calling up a different expert each year in a different discipline, was because there were so many gaps in my knowledge and in my skill set. So I too experienced imposter syndrome and fear that like, well, I don't have a degree in psychology. I don't have a degree in marketing. Like, who am I to profess this sort of thing? Now, certainly others may not have taken the path I took, right? And that's the case for you as well, right? You were self-taught and then you brought on teams and then you managed those teams and you learned through, serving clients and serving communities and all those things. Like, your development over time has exposed you to more and more and more knowledge, which makes you feel like you have less, right? You realize there's more. You climb that mountain that you thought was a mountain, and it really isn't, because now you see all the other mountains. That actually gives you this feeling like I'm an imposter. Now, so the first thing is, it's wonderful, especially if it's coming from sincerity and humility. Then it is a wonderful thing. as long as, one, it doesn't stop you from taking action. And that's also part of the point of Masterminds, right? Because how many times has it stopped you or me or others, right, from feeling like an imposter? The other thing is that, the whole concept, take account before your account is taken. So if you start to experience that sort of feeling, like, am I an imposter? Assess it. Have others assess it. Am I? Because am I experiencing that Dunning-Kruger effect, the bias, where I am overestimating what I know, or am I the other spectrum, or am I somewhere in between? Others can give you that feedback. You can also do that. So so just keep that in mind. The more you know, the more you tend to feel like there's more to know, because it's true, right? It's just true. But that is not what makes someone an imposter. What makes someone an imposter is deceiving, right? And so saying they have something they don't, saying they can do something they can't, right? So there's that. And then and if you think about it, like, Islamically, what is the sort of the advice or the instruction on dawah? It's convey it, even if you only know one ayah. If it's only one ayah, convey it. Did he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say, don't be an imposter, don't just convey one ayah? No, convey what you know. Just don't overstate it. Don't step outside of your bounds. Don't claim knowledge or speak without knowledge. But if you have it, it's actually, you're supposed to. You're supposed to convey it. You're supposed to do it. It's part of what we're supposed to do. Just make sure you know the line, and make sure you surround yourself with people that will tell you you've crossed a line, right? So absolutely. I think those are probably the main things. And the other thing I would say is, if it stops you from doing action, think about your why. When you think about the mission of Sunan, right? And what it wants to do and serve, and how it wants to serve the Muslim organizations and businesses and things. If you think about that, what happens if you stop doing what you're doing? Right? You rob the world of the service that you could bring to the world. And Allahu Alam, I don't know, but we might be questioned about that. You have a gift, you have a knowledge, you have a skill set, and you're not using it to serve. Allahu Alam, I don't know. It might be the opposite. It might be like we're held accountable for it.
And actually, that reminds me, Chief, that's actually one of the questions Kareem asked me during our earlier sessions. We should have brought Kareem onto this call. We would have made it a three-way.
We should have just done trifecta.
He said, imagine on the Day of Judgment, Allah says to you, Sajjad, that I gave you this gift of design. I gave you this gift of marketing, this insight. What did you do with it? Did you make a change? Or did you just wobble over it? Or did you just dabble your life through it? Right? Tori, I gave you this gift of influence. How many organizations have you influenced? How much positive impact have you had? So I think it's a very beautiful self-reflection, and just kind of holding ourselves accountable that, we're figuring it out. And sometimes it feels like, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the beauty of that too is being in a leadership position, running an organization, managing people. It's also the beauty of, I tell my guys all the time that when I hire someone, I want to be the lowest denominator in the organization. Mm. I should be the dumbest person in the organization. I want to bring on people that are better than me, smarter than me, more brilliant, taking risk. Because if I'm just going to bring on people that I'm the cap, then it's what good is it? It just becomes such an egotistical thing, and it's not really about the sense of clarity or alignment with, inshallah, what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. And then the culture you create in your organization or your business is that they are empowered to say, no, that's not correct, or you don't know this thing. Yeah. And that is an important element that makes one not an imposter, right? You're because you're owning, I don't know this thing. What do you think? Or I'm not sure if I see this picture completely. What do you think? And so to be open to feedback and actually recognize, is this feedback accurate or is it not? It's sort of like, when I was in leadership at the Masjid, it's like, yeah, there are people that might complain about a lot of different things. That doesn't mean that this complaint they're bringing right now is incorrect. We still need to assess it and say, is this correct? Are they right? Are they on to something? Should I address that? Right? Like the humility part needs to be there. It absolutely needs to be there, because we're going to be tested by by our knowledge and our skills as well. Like we're going to be tested on how we implemented them, how we did it. So, and then so there's this like balance, like the more you do, the more you implement, the more you might get at risk for approaching arrogance if you're surrounded by people that are praising and look at this and wow, mashallah, look at that. You got to have that, grounding, right, along the way. So I think imposter syndrome, to a certain amount, I think is probably a healthy thing, as long as it doesn't stop you from doing the thing you're going to be asked about, and as long as it doesn't, make you, I would say what I call it, almost like a toxic kind of humility, a blameworthy humility, a humility that will, oh no, I don't know, but you're really the one that does know. Like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he spoke up and said, I can take care of the storehouses for the food, for the grain, right? Like he wasn't like, oh, well, I should just let someone else be no, he spoke up when he was the right person for that job. And so there is this balance in there, and it's a constant muhasabah. And don't think muhasabah and taking oneself to account only exists in what we think are religious domains, because all of it is a religious domain. Our interactions with our transactions with money, our transactions with other people, our interactions, our relations, all of them. Like, so, and this is where it really comes to full fruition, is when you're in business. It's like, anyway, so that's what I would say about imposter syndrome.
I don't even want to end this.
What's that?
I said I'm having such a good time, I don't even want to end this. Like, I had a few questions I wanted to ask. Are you okay on time?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So there's this one thing I wanted to share that from our session. So like, alhamdulillah, you've been so gracious to give me your time with coaching. Mashallah, I think you know what you're doing. But one of the concepts that I really enjoyed, and it really kind of put things in perspective for me, it was a shift in perspective. Mm-hmm. It was the concept of having board of advisors.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right?
Yeah.
And for me,
I
it's
saw
like
the light go on when I said it to you the first time. Yeah.
And it was like, honestly, for me, it was like, I've never thought of it that way. Like, we think of board of advisors in institutions, companies, masajids, nonprofits, whatever. But it's like, have a board of advisor for yourself. And what really, struck out to me was like, okay, when you're thinking about these board of advisors, don't think of it as these are people that are living right now. Like, you're not hiring them as your board of advisors, but these are individuals. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure.
And then,
so certainly, by the way, this is by no means my idea. It's actually very common in the coaching world, and in the world of masterminds, is to create a fictitious board of advisors, meaning a list of people, usually a handful, 5 to 10 maybe, and probably not more than that, where you list them out and list out some of the traits and qualities that they have that you would like to rely on, okay? And then periodically, when you come up to a decision or or you're on an emotional roller coaster, or coming up to something, you bounce it off of them. Now, what does that mean? Obviously, you're not going to call them, right? But you might just, in your mind, imagine, what would they say in this instance? So one of the people on mine, especially when I was a leader in the masjid, was Omar radiallahu anh. What would Omar do in this situation, right? And you bounce that off, and then it's like there's this sense of justice that's like, whoa, all of a sudden it becomes clear. Now I might have made a different decision if I didn't bounce it off of him, right? Radiallahu an. And obviously this is a fictitious conversation in our own head, but we're thinking about their traits. And if somebody had those traits, how might they look at this situation? And it can affect your behavior that way. So typically people that have boards of advisors, they pick them in different domains. Sometimes they're in the domain of like a life wheel, like, spiritual advisor, a physical health advisor, a financial advisor, a business sort of space, and, all of those, family and social. Or you pick somebody who is sort of like the comprehensive sort of human, like the Prophet ﷺ, and you say, well, what might he do in this situation? And or you pick somebody when it comes to like, someone else I was coaching very recently picked Khabib. And the reason was because he was not uncompromising. That's not the right word, but it's like firm. He when he stood on something, he stood on it, and it didn't matter. Remember when he raised his hand and he was like, Alhamdulillah, I'm saying Alhamdulillah, and the crowd was booing. It didn't matter to him. He had to do, right? So this person picked that person for that quality, because when they enter social situations, they're like, sort of evading the Islamic questions when it comes to the workplace or whatever. So they picked him for that. And so now what they do is before they go into like a networking event or something, they just like, they're much more firm on the things they need to be firm on before they go in there. Yeah, alhamdulillah, right? So you can pick people like that. You can some people pick like big business owners or investors or things like that, or they pick people from history, or they even pick fictitious people like Yoda, right? So I mean, Yoda has like or even the Mandalorian. I mean, he's always sticking like this is the way. He's sticking to it. He's like like. And honorable, dignified kind of thing. So it can be fictitious. It can be a sports star. It can be, somebody in the business world. But you pick this board of advisors and you just bounce ideas off of them. And some people put real people on there too, and then they actually call them and say, "Hey, I'm going through this thing. What do you think?" But other times they just run it, bounce it off of them. By the way, everybody should have their spouse on there.
There you go.
Because they're the second buyer on the other end of all the things. When I bought that Mastermind with Brendon, I had to answer to the spouse too. So you got to do that. You got to check in, put them on your board.
Absolutely. And Chief, like for me, this was such a new concept for me. I'm sure it's been around. But like, it was actually a very big decision that I was making at Sunan in the month of January. It was essentially bringing on a new resource to our team. Mashallah, amazing individual. Someone who's much better than I am, much more skillful. But I was like, man, this is big. Like, no more dabbling. Like, this is big time, right? Like, we're talking about a top-notch resource. And then I was like, okay, why am I taking the burden of running all the analysis and everything? I was like, let me consult with my advisors.
Yeah.
Right. And though like obviously my wife is on there, so I consulted with her. But just like internally, I was like, for example, I have Sayyidina Abu Bakr on my team. It's like, what would Sayyidina Abu Bakr do? Yeah. Right. And then I have other people that like Sheikh Mohsen. Right? Sheikh Mohsen al-Najjar that you and I both benefited immensely from. Like, what would he advise here? Right? What would Dr. Tori say? Right? And just kind of running through the list and like, okay, because it forces you to think from a different perspective, removing yourself from the equation. When you're thinking from the lens of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, it's like, okay, this is generosity himself. How would he approach this? How would Sayyidina Umar approach this? How would Sheikh Mohsen approach this? How would my wife approach this? How would Dr. Tori approach this? And so on. So for me, it was a very,
Can I tell you a funny one that just occurred to me? Well, it's not funny. Maybe it is. It was our first meeting as a council for the Masjid, and with me as president. And we were walking into where the meeting was, and there was a dish of candy sitting on the secretary's desk. Okay. The office was closed, but we were going in for our meeting, and there was a candy dish. And we all started reaching into it, grabbing the candy. And I started to unwrap it. Right before that meeting, I consulted my board of advisors, like, in my own head. And I remember thinking about Omar, radiallahu anh, as a leader. And so as I walked in and we all started grabbing this candy, I started to unwrap it. And then I was like, wait a minute, who bought this candy? And everybody's like, well, I don't know, it's here for whoever wants it. And I was like, well, if the secretary bought it because she wants people to have it, then it's okay for us to eat, I think. But if the masjid bought it, I don't think we can benefit from the masjid in a way that others can't benefit from it. And I don't think we should eat this. And everybody's looking at me like, what is wrong with you, bro? Like, it's just a piece of candy.
Where did this guy come from?
But because I was consulting my board of advisors and Omar, I don't know if he would think that's just a piece of candy. We should not benefit in a way from our positions that is, So anyway, just saying like that before you enter a situation, sometimes we only do it when we have a situation or a decision to make, but also before you walk in, just run through the list and just be like, okay, I need to, do that. So anyway, that was just one that people still every once in a while bring up. Like, remember that thing with the candy? I was like, oh yeah, well, sorry. Yeah, but honestly, we need to be careful. And that actually kind of set a tone, right? On, bringing food or whatever to meetings, et cetera, how we cover it. So
yeah, absolutely.
It matters.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah.
So Chief, as we're kind of wrapping up, just a few last questions I did have just for myself and for the audience, inshallah, that will be listening as an Islamic brand. Like Sunan, we're serving the Islamic space, Islamic brands, and through Impact Lab that we're creating, inshallah. Ramadan's coming up. And Ramadan for us is the Super Bowl for a lot of Islamic organizations, right? It's the Super Bowl of creating impact, right? So there's obviously the self-reflection, the benefit, the tazkiyah that we do internally as individuals. But even as organizations, this is the time where we can shine, right? Where we can really step up especially as nonprofits, right? And showcase the impact or create that impact around the world. So is there any advice that you would give to, especially, let's say, speaking specifically to our nonprofit organizations in America, of how we can really try to stand out this Ramadan from a marketing standpoint, from a business standpoint, from an impact standpoint, and really make this Ramadan something that's special? Sorry, I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's perfectly all right. So there's a quote from Maya Angelou. She said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." They will never forget how you made them feel. I believe that we should focus on experience. What is the experience of somebody walking in to your masjid or engaging in business with your organization, or receiving charity? Are they receiving sadaqah or zakat in a dignified way? What's the experience? Are they when at iftar? When they break their fast? Do they feel like they're welcome, or do they feel like they're being judged? Now, you can't control what people feel, but you can shape the experience. So what is it like for somebody who's kind of rediscovering Islam, and they're coming to the masjid and they may not be wearing the things that the way, you might think is ideal? What is their experience? What is the experience of somebody who's coming who may have trouble navigating the steps, or may have difficulty with the getting in and around the facility? What's the experience of every one of the services that are provided? Can we be very deliberate about those and ask ourselves, can we level those up? Can we make those powerful moments that will sort of be lasting? People will never forget how you made them feel. And for anybody that thinks this is like outside of the fold of Islam or something, just piece together all of the ahadith about the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, where, the famous one about everyone thinking that they were the most beloved to him. Why? Because the experience of interacting with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was such that it was so amazing that they thought that they were the most beloved to him, right? These ahadith about his smile going from, ear to ear, or that he turned his whole body to a person when he spoke to them, or, right, like that they all felt this. Like, those aren't detached from the experiences of going to the masjid. And now one of the things that, like, I remember we were doing a retreat, and I had created these cards where we would go through different scenarios. Okay, somebody from West Africa is a single, like walks in, the only one from their from their family migrated here. They're looking for, and we create this scenario around the person. Now they're in line to get food for iftar. Okay, and what is their experience? What could go wrong is the first question. And then the second question is, how could it be awesome? So if you ask those questions about every one of your services, and then start saying, okay, now it's not a West African person who's alone, separated from their family. Now it's a Desi uncle who has been here and was one of the founders of the masjid, and is, feels a certain way about the way it's going. Or it's a new Muslim who is coming, and they brought a guest. Or it's a neighbor who's wondering what the heck is going on here, right? And they come in. What is their experience? How could it be awesome, and how would it go wrong? And so in the concept, so how would it go wrong? The reason to think about this is there's a concept in psychology. I think the guy's name was Gary Klein, as a psychologist. He came up with this concept called a pre-mortem. If it's going to go, post-mortem is what happened, like what was the cause of death? Well, if you have a project or a service or something you're doing for the community, how could it go wrong? What will make it fail? Assess those ahead of time. You have time before Ramadan. You know what? Ramadan comes every year. We're dealing with it every single year. How can we make it awesome? And where might we trip up? And address those things. Like, and if you think about experience, like, you may have heard the story about my kids when they were younger. They thought broccoli was a dessert. The reason was because we changed the experience. We forgot the broccoli one night, that it was cooked and it was on the stove. And my wife's like, oh, I forgot the broccoli. And I went, who wants broccoli? And my wife and I both went, me. And then the little ones went, me. And then we brought it out, and I gave them a little talk to the girls. I was like, look, these are little trees, and there's animals in there. And you need to make sure that you don't disturb the animals. Make sure they all get out before you eat them. And then we're making bird sounds, doing whatever. Like, and then when they start to eat it, we're like, no, don't eat it. Pushing it away. Like, we made it an experience. It was fun. And then we served the vegetables last every day afterwards for a while, right? That was an experience. But think about what McDonald's does. Which would you rather have? A Happy Meal with a toy in it? We all get to go out. Or you better eat your chicken, mister, or you're not getting any dessert. Like, no wonder little kids want to go to McDonald's. So what is the experience for us? I mean, have you ever opened an Apple product? You open an Apple product, your pinkies come out, you're like peeling the thing away. Why do your pinkies come out, right? Like, how can we make our experiences with our Muslim-owned businesses and our Muslim organizations, how can we make the experience such that it is sticky, it is memorable, it is unforgettable, and in a good way, right? I would say that's where you focus. Focus on the experience, and then the other stuff will start to take care of it itself.
MashaAllah. SubhanAllah.
Make it remarkable. If it's remarkable, people will remark about it.
There you go. You're like the social media guru. MashaAllah.
Really.
MashaAllah. No, but that's beautiful. So kind of doing a pre-mortem of essentially what would, it's kind of like what is it called? And I'm sure I'm butchering it, the inversion thinking. How can we fail this Ramadan?
Yeah.
Right. And kind of listing out all the things, kind of doing a pre-mortem. And like, let's address this. Let's now flip it. How can we create a positive impact, inshallah?
Right. And let's think about all of the different types of visitors, because sometimes it can get kind of insular. We're used to certain people, so we cater to a certain group of people, right?
So,
I mean, I remember I was sitting at one. I might as well mention this now because, in a way, it's funny, and in a way, it's tragic. So the masjid had the masjid that I was attending at the time had a largely, sort of Indo-Pak population, right? So the food was often spicy, and so people would come to iftar, but the food would be too spicy. So for some of them, right? Not me, because I'm now indoctrinated. But now I can hang with the spiciest of spicy. But I remember one brother specifically.
Us Turks are not. We don't like
What's
spicy
that?
food. I said us Turks don't like spicy food.
So I remember one brother specifically came and sat next to me with a bowl of fruit. And he's like, bro, I can only eat. This is probably the only thing I can eat here because it's going to be too spicy. And he's like, so I'm so glad they have fruit. He sat down, he took a bite, and he's like, oh my gosh, how is it that the fruit is spicy? Like, who's doing this? So anyway, just think about that. Like, don't say, well, most of our community members are this ethnicity, therefore we're serving this ethnic food. Think about the experience of the others that are coming. And do they feel welcome? Do they feel welcome? And that I would say focus on being welcoming is vital this Ramadan.
Just to add to that, I think that also goes towards the online experience.
Right.
Like as organizations, what is the message that we're pushing out? What are we pushing out on social media? Right. In our email campaigns, in our SMS campaigns, right? That in-person experience should also almost be like a mirror for the online, that digital experience,
right?
And creating that sense of synergy between everything.
Yeah, and does what you're putting out into the world convey you are welcome here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, it's vital. It's vital.
Yeah, and I think it may have been you, Chief, or someone else gave the example that imagine an uncle from Pakistan coming to your community, coming for iftar. And right behind him, coming up the stairs, is a convert who's tattooed up to his neck. Mm-hmm. Are they going to have the same experience?
Right.
How can we ensure they both have a beautiful experience?
Right.
That they both feel welcomed, that they're both not feeling alienated in any ways, right? Chief, thank you so much for all of this wonderful talk. This is like a coaching call. Like I just got so much immense value. Forget the world. This is for me. I'm getting the benefit of it. Thank you so much, Dr. Tori, for all the amazing work that you're doing. And again, may Allah continue to put immense khair and barakah in everything that you do. For everyone that's listening, Dr. Tori, check him out on drtori.com. He also has a influencer book club that he's recently launched. So everyone should check that out, benefit from that.
Well, not influencer. Let's be careful just because it's not like Kardashians selling eyelash extensions.
You're not selling lipstick.
This is how to influence others for good. So influence book club. Yeah.
Influence book club.
Yeah, we go over an influence book, and learn how to implement it in our lives, in our relationships, and
these are great
at
books.
home.
The Power of Moments.
Yeah.
Amazing. Some of the great books that we've kind of covered so far. So definitely, guys, check that out. And then also, Dr. Tori does a lot of something that I've immensely benefited from is coaching calls, coaching sessions. So, Doctor, check that out as well. If you're ready to take things to the next level and level up, Bismillah ala barakatillah. Thank you so much, Chief. Inshallah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I want to, I'm going to have you on often because I think there's immense value and immense khair that we can do, inshallah. But thank you, everyone,
may Allah
for
put barakah in your work, and may Allah put barakah in this podcast and everyone who listens. Ameen,
ya Rab. With that, thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.